And Nakisani wants to know, he says, I have attorney's costs saved up for a sectional title property that I am interested in buying. I had hoped to finance the purchase through a bank loan, but was unsuccessful due to affordability issues. I'm now stuck with a signed OTP, and the seller is not willing to enter into an installment sale agreement due to the fact that they would require the purchase price to then buy their own property. I'm not willing to let go of this deal, says Nakisani. I need funds to purchase the property. Please, can you advise on alternate options that would be available to me? Bruno?
Cool. All right. So if the seller's not willing to give leeway here, so also remember there's certain levels or extent. So the seller wants their money because they needed to go buy another property. What we do need to ask ourselves is how much do they actually need in order to go buy this other property? Are they buying it in cash outright, or do they just need a large deposit? So what they need to bear in mind first is maybe there is a way to actually raise partial funding, and you can do this in a couple of ways. There's networks out there. It depends what you're buying. If you're a first-time home buyer, typically you wouldn't have access to these networks because you're not doing it from an entrepreneurial perspective. So there you'd struggle. In those cases, you could always approach FLISP. So this is basically a first-time home buying subsidy. Like I think it ranges from 27,000 Rand to 121,000 Rand. It only covers a portion of the price. So you would need to be able to raise funding for the rest of it. So again, in the context of the question that you haven't been able to obtain funding. Does that mean that you get zero? Does that mean that the bank was willing to give you 70%, 80%, or 90% loan to value? Depending on that answer, if you got partial funding, you just need to fill in the gap. If you only need to fill in the gap, you might be able to get it from FLISP if this is your first time that you're buying a house and you're planning on living in it, or you might be able to approach like an investor network or financiers that might be able to lend you money just to fill in the gap. If none of that works, and it's no to all of those, and they don't make sense, another option that they could consider in Cape Town, I think it's the rent to buy package. This one is by Mayor de Waal, and then there's another one by Sentinel, and they're both based out of Cape Town. So both of these offer basic packages where you go, you make an offer, somebody else would actually acquire the property for themselves. They would then sell it back to you as a rent to buy. So you'd live in the property, you'd pay them rent, you'd pay them a portion of the purchase price. And if I'm not mistaken, the rent to buy with Mayor de Waal is 2-year cap, and Sentinel, I think, goes up to 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. And they would fund your purchase and then basically sell it back to you, and they would make their money on the margin. So as an investor, it's not great for the person doing an investment because obviously you lose a lot of the profit in the margins. But as a first-time home buyer that's intent in living in that property, yes, you pay a bit extra, but you get, the property of your dreams. So it's up to you if you want to approach it like that.
Let's quickly move on, and I see we've got some time, onto a question that was asked by, I think it was by myself. And the question is, person A has a bond over the property of person B. Person B disposed of the property in question without consulting person A, while the secured debt is still outstanding. So there's a secured debt over the property. What are A's rights in this regard? Bruno, Cilna, anyone who's up for this one?
I think it's Bruno's turn. It feels like we're doing a good 1-1 turn tonight. I'd be happy to take it, but I'll keep you busy for a long time. And it feels like Bruno's turn. Look at us sharing like good attorneys.
Nice. So if I understand the question correctly, the immovable property was subject to a mortgage bond. So maybe just for the sake of context, so the viewers understand, mortgage bonds are a form of security in our law. It basically works as a caveat or a restriction that doesn't allow, that gives someone security over a property. So typically you find that your banks would lend money to a homeowner. That homeowner would then purchase the property, but the bank would have security over that property, meaning that if something went wrong and there was some kind of default in the loan amount, that the bank would be able to foreclose. And that's where we get to the terms foreclose and sales and execution and the like. But the other perspective is that the person that owns the property is not actually able, it has limited rights to the property, in the sense that in that mortgage bond agreement, there's limitations to their ownership. So part of these limitations is the right to alienation or sale. So they're not allowed to actually sell this property. And there's actually other things that people don't even know about, like some of these mortgage bonds restrict how the property is supposed to be used, what you can and can't do, even has certain clauses regarding the maintenance and upkeep, like reasonable upkeep of the property. And I mean, there's all back in the days, there was even a cession to rentals. So if something had gone wrong, you would cede your rights to rent to the bank off the bat, and the bank would actually be able to go to the property and start collecting rentals from the property. Either way, so that being the basis of how our law works, you typically find that a bond registered over a property would therefore not allow anyone to be able to sell the property without the mortgagee, the bank, knowing about it. So that's why, so I'm not 100% sure if this actually happened, or if, that's a question about what if it happens, because what if, I doubt it's ever going to get to a point where that would be allowable. If it already happened, sure, like that's a big one, because I don't know how the deeds office, and our deeds office isn't bad. Our deeds office doesn't let things like that happen. I've never experienced a situation where a mortgage was actually ignored, and I doubt it happens very often. If it did, I'm sure that this is something that the courts would be able to deal with. As a lender or security holder, you might be able to approach the courts to restore the status quo, if that's the case. Also, in the context of this question, because it wasn't specified whether it's movable or immovable property, it might just be worth mentioning that if it's movable property, it's a completely different story, because there we do deal with bonds, but some mortgage bonds, it's notarial bonds. And sometimes in those instances, a general notarial bond isn't registered against a specific asset, which means that people can still sell that asset off. And if that's the case, that's a different story altogether. But immovable property, which is what the Property Law Alliance is about, it's unlikely to happen.